Hello and welcome to Please Watch This, a film podcast where two film-loving mates with gaps in their viewing history recommend films to one another so they can once and for all answer the question, who has better taste? I'm Sam Blakely, as always I'm joined by Hugh Dempsey. Hugh, how are you?
Hello, I'm okay, Sam, how are you?
Do you think I'll get that job at Radio 1?
Maybe like Radio Caroline or
I'll add it
Radio
to the
Luxembourg.
Yeah. On the subject of a wider listenership, we are now on the YouTube. You might be listening to us on the YouTube right now.
On the YouTube, is that because you followed a link on the Facebook?
It's where all the kids are these days.
Yeah.
If they're not on the Facebook, they're on the YouTubes.
Yep.
That's where people want to watch podcasts with no visual feature. I'm told.
You're told. Who tells you this? The kids?
The kids. Yeah, when I tell the kids I've got a podcast, they're like, "Oh, you're on YouTube," and I'll be like,
"No.
Why would I? It's a podcast. Why would I put it on YouTube? But there's no visual element." And then they say, "Well, I won't listen to it then." And you know, a cynic would say they're finding an excuse not to listen to me, but on the other hand, I can't blame them because what am I doing in the park anyway? At that time of night, going up to kids on swings. So really, you know, it's sort of
kids are going on swings late at night.
I mean, like, you know, the youth.
Yeah.
No one's perfect. That's what I always say to the kids on the swings, you know, selling drugs.
Yeah.
After I've told them about the podcast, it's on YouTube anyway. Surprisingly, we're called Please Watch This podcast.
What a shock that was.
Yeah. So as we speak, some of the back catalogue is on there, but it takes longer than you'd think. So not all of it is.
Yeah, so if you want some variety, then
or if you
look
want a
elsewhere.
job putting stuff on the YouTube, we can't pay, but we will give references, but not very nice ones.
Well, what's the law that you can't be negative, can you? But you can be honest. I think is the
so do
saying.
a good job, and we'll be as honest as we possibly can be.
Yep.
So internship.
Speaking of things that aren't very honest, what's this week's film that we're doing?
Oh, good. Right, I see what you mean now. This week's film is Sicario, or I chose the wrong week to give up smoking. It's the third Denis Villeneuve film we've been doing. We've done Blade Runner 2049. And
that's Under Trois.
Under Trois.
For the French-Canadian listeners.
For the French-Canadian listeners, of which there are some. I mean, none is a number, so there's a number of them. There's any number of French-Canadian listeners, so get in touch if you are French-Canadian. Get in touch, find us on Twitter at PleaseWatchPod. Get in touch via email at pleasewatchthis.pod@gmail.com if you want.
Yeah, you can
comment
email
on a
us.
video on YouTube.
Yes, or apologise in the comment section of a video.
We're told engagements is good, and we probably won't ever monetize, so we just want to feel validated for all this effort. So
we won't monetize just so you fucking clear YouTube. Yeah,
we're
not fucking monetizing this fucking shit.
we are not getting to the top of those search results with that sort of talk.
You're fucking too right.
So this week's film, Sicario, directed by Denis Villeneuve, written by Taylor Sheridan, and starring some big names: Emily Blunt, Josh Brolin, definitely not James Brolin, his dad, who I'm going to keep referring to by accident, Josh Brolin, Benicio del Toro. Any other big names? Oh, Daniel Kaluuya is there as well. So big names, good film, and such. Hugh had never seen it before, and I had once.
That's how our podcast works.
That's how the podcast works. If you're new to this because of how good we are at YouTube algorithms, then listen up. Each week, one of us hasn't seen a film that the other one has seen, and then they watch it. And then they talk about it. So
we go to the other one. We go, please watch this film.
That's it. Yeah. And then you, as the listener, as a second hand, you could vicariously be given that instruction as well. If you haven't seen Sicario, we are going to spoil it. So please watch this, and then come back and please listen to this. I've used the pronoun twice there without actually using a proper noun like between them. But the first this
You're an animal.
was the film. The second this was the podcast.
So, Sam, what's the storyline to Sicario?
Storyline, okay. It's quite a basic plot, really, and I'm going to get some details wrong because it's a bit twisty and turny and you don't know who to trust and such, but it's about kind of American government agencies like the CIA, FBI, trying to crack down and control and such the Mexican drug cartels and border police. Emily Blunt, she's kind of she's an FBI agent who's mostly
Recruited.
involved. Yeah, she's recruited. She normally does kidnappings. There's a sort of kidnapping bust that turns out to be linked to Mexican drug cartels. Josh Brolin is there as a CIA agent, recruiting her onto a team to try to get at the people who caused this. And their job really is to get in and... Well, the point of the film is you don't know what their job is. Emily Blunt is this uninitiated person. We are her. She's the protagonist. We don't know what's going on. They're being very shadowy. You don't really know what Benicio del Toro's character is or his role, but they know that they're going to do something that's going to figure out this cartel issue. This is where the spoilers come in. Okay, so this is spoiler territory we're going to go into now. It turns out that their plan is to cause so much problems that a high-level cartel guy, Manuel Diaz, is going to go back into America and...
Sorry, no, he's going to go back to Mexico.
Sorry, excuse me, yes, back to Mexico, find his boss, they're going to trail him, and that will take them to his boss. Spoiler territory, here's the spoilers. So, what Emily Blunt doesn't know is just how ruthless and shady and not by the book Josh Brolin and Benicio del Toro's character are. Turns out what they're trying to do is destroy one of the cartels so that only one cartel controls everything, because that's the way they liked it back in the days of Pablo Escobar. A lot of reference to Medellin, the times in the... Was it 70s or 80s, that sort of time?
Yeah, it's like late 70s, 80s and then early 90s sort of thing.
Do you know much about that? Is that something you've ever looked into, or did you watch?
I've watched.
That show?
I watched Narcos, which is the show about the. I think he's the DEA agent who gets sent down to Colombia to work and try to prevent to stop the war. He's part of the war on drugs, but obviously it's based on a book by the agent who the main character in that film is a real person. He was a real. He wrote a book about it, about the activities, but you know, when it's television, it can be. A little bit more dramatised. Dramatised. Things are amalgamated, and it's not. It wouldn't be the most reliable source of information, I would.
All I really know about Pablo Escobar is from when Vinny Chase on Entourage was playing him in the film he did called Medellin. Now, Entourage is awful. Don't watch it.
Yes, it is.
Just awful. On every human moral filmmaking kind of level. I've not seen the film, but I did watch all, I think, 8 seasons of the show.
You watched it?
By the time I got to sort of season 4 or 5, I thought, right, this is, what's it called? The sunk time fallacy or something?
I'll be brutally honest with you, mate. I've never watched a full episode in my life because it looked bad.
There's something like sunk lost fallacy or something. It's kind of like you go, well, I've put all this time in, I might as well put more bad time or chasing
throwing bad money after good.
Throwing bad money after good, basically. It was anyway. Well, let's not talk about Entourage. We don't really need to talk about Pablo Escobar either. But it's drug cartel stuff. It's murky. It's all about how there's no easy solutions, and sometimes you've got to get your hands dirty to affect good change and so on.
So, what do you like about this film, Sam? Why would you recommend it to me? What got you on? What made it? How did it make its way to the podcast this week?
Well, the reason why I really like this film is because it is absolutely expert at show don't tell. As I say, written by Taylor Sheridan, and a lot of bad films or a lot of mediocre films can't maintain this much mystery. You know, Emily Blunt literally knows nothing until around about the midpoint, about 55 minutes in, where she's told some of the plan. Eventually, but by that point she's gone through a lot. She's gone across the border several times. She's seen death. She's killed somebody. The way that it shows but doesn't tell is in many different ways. The best example I can think of is when Emily Blunt first meets Josh Brolin's character, and he's wearing sandals. And he's in a FBI building or CIA. Anyway, I think it's an FBI building, and he's there, and they're not really deferent to him. They don't keep referring to him by rank. The way that they show that he's in charge or that he's very powerful is he's wearing sandals and a very simple shirt. He's not in a suit or anything like that. And it's a really excellent way of letting you know that this guy is important and respected and powerful. And it's also played fantastically by Josh Brolin. He's very kind of ironic and calm and placid and cool and sort of contemplative and weirdly charming, you know. So it's just really good at that, and yeah, it's just really excellent at the show don't tell. It ramps up this tension. At no point does it just lay it all out for you. You're supposed to be trying to piece it together yourself, and often that can be too much, but in a lot of films. But I think it really gets that line perfectly here.
Anything else?
Yeah, alongside that, I think we've talked about Blade Runner 2049 and Arrival before. Both of those films, I found myself drifting off a little bit to them when I was watching them in the evening, because he does take his time, and it's one of the things that puts some people off Villeneuve, and it's one of the things that makes other people love him. And I think this is, for me, where it's used best. It's not overused, and the constant mystery is what maintains my interest when it is quite long shots. It does, because I'm constantly trying to figure out what's going on, because I'm Emily Blunt's character. I'm completely in the dark. Alongside that, Denis Villeneuve does like to work with Roger Deakins, the cinematographer, and he does an excellent job here. It's very distinctly Roger Deakins. I don't know anything technical to say in terms of why that's good cinematography, but it looks beautiful, and it kind of captures it without just having a yellow lens when you're in Mexico.
Or a lens flare if you're J.J. Abrams.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it doesn't have anything annoying like that. So I think that's just really excellent. The other great thing actually about this is how reminiscent it is of The Wire. So The Wire, I know, is a show that Hugh hasn't seen, but as it turns out, millions of people have, and it is excellent. And the great thing about The Wire is exactly what's great about this. It's show don't tell. You enter a room, you enter a scene, and two characters are talking like there isn't a camera there, that they're not holding your hand through the scene, they're talking like those people actually would talk, and it's up to you to deal with it. As in fact, I'm going to quote the TV show Community that we have mentioned before in the past.
What show's this? That
I've
never watched or seen or heard of.
Community that you might have seen.
Right, yeah.
And they are doing a Spanish test, I think, and Troy says, I didn't understand, what was it, I understood enough of the first half to get me through the second half, and Abed said, like the first season of The Wire. and it's like that, I had to watch The Wire with subtitles. That's when I started watching everything with subtitles, and watch it a couple times, and you just see so much because they're not just sitting down and recounting it for you. When you look at Benicio del Toro's character and Josh Brolin's character, when they're on their way to do these missions, they're quite bored. Josh Brolin immediately falls asleep when they get onto the private jet, and it's because he knows. And so we'd be that bored if we knew everything. It's not an hour-long procedural with a simple answer. It's got really complicated answers, in much the same way that Jack Nicholson's character, when he's on trial in Have you seen A Few Good Men?
No.
Right, we'll have to watch that. It's not really a spoiler, or I'm going to frame it as though it's not a spoiler, so that it doesn't seem like a spoiler. Where he's been asked about basically some bad goings on, some with some what do you call them? Well, soldiers basically. And he says, I don't know the quote off the top of my head, but he basically says, "You get to sleep cushy in your home, knowing that there's walls around you that are protected, but there are men who need to man those walls and look after it in the night. But you wouldn't want to do that." It's basically saying it's more complicated, and this film kind of captures that. It's not like there's the good guys and the bad guys. Sometimes the good guys have good qualities. Sometimes the bad guys have good guys have bad qualities. And actually, the answer isn't as simple as let's just legalise drugs, or let's just put loads of money into it. Anything like
another
that.
film that deals with that kind of situation to a point is the 2018 film Vice, starring Christian Bale.
Right,
where he
I haven't
plays
seen
Dick
that
Cheney.
yet.
Yeah, there's a bit in that's very poignant. I'm not going to spoil anything that deals exactly with that issue. That's kind of the crux of the film. So I would recommend. Maybe it's not a film I don't think we're ever going to do on the podcast. But if you have seen it, you know the scene I'm on about. If you haven't seen it, it's definitely worth going away and watching, because it's a really enjoyable film. And
I mean that was a time when people were
period.
And TV shows were genuinely questioning if you could torture somebody to get information from them that would save 1,000 innocent children from being bombed. Isn't it moral to do it? I don't know if it's very similar to the moral conundrum there, but basically, there's not necessarily an easy, clean answer there. It's a zero-sum game in some ways. Yeah.
So, Sam, what else do you like about this film?
Well, those are really the main things. I think the other thing really to note is the soundtrack is just fantastic by Johan Johansson. I think that's how you pronounce it, maybe Johan Johansson from Iceland. it's the drums and the percussion. It's a very, very tense film, incredibly tense film. When we get into favourite scenes, we'll talk more about that. But it really knows how to ratchet up without telling you anything. You're just there. The soundtrack tells you that you should be scared, and then you are as a result. In terms of what I think you will like, I know that you love. I know that you love two Denis Villeneuve films in Blade Runner and in Arrival, and this film isn't exactly like them because it's a bit earlier in his career, but it certainly shares a lot of the qualities with that. And I think you are interested in moral ambiguity. I don't think you necessarily, as much as you like Star Wars and Indiana Jones, I don't think you necessarily need your bad guys to be Nazis or space Nazis, you know.
So or zombie Nazis.
Or zombie Nazis, the worst kind.
Yeah.
Or you know, so I think that you will like that.
Yeah. Okay.
What I think you might not like is the withholding does have diminishing returns. You're told so little for the first hour of this film, essentially, that you can give up on it. There was a film I tried to watch that Ben recommended. I think it's called Brick with Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and it withheld so much and it was so mysterious. I actually didn't finish the film. I kind of just thought, this is not giving me any of the answers that I want really quickly or even slowly in this film. There's a great line from Daniel Kaluuya in this film, which is, there's in the dark and there's how you're treating us, and it might be that you gave up on it, gave up caring because it was so long that they didn't really give you any information. So yeah, I think that might be something.
I suppose films of this nature do have that fine line between being, like you said, procedural in the fact that you're watching professionals at work doing something, so there's going to be a level of terminology that you're not going to be clued into because you're not in that environment, but also obviously not having it so dense that the audience can't follow at all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you have to be given enough to go on, like I say with The Wire, understanding enough for the first half to get you through the second half. If you didn't understand anything, you'd go, well, why should I care? Because I don't even know what the stakes are here. I don't even fully know what the conflicts are. It really does lay out, though, at least here, what the conflicts are and sort of who, not to trust anybody except maybe Emily Blunt's character. I think that one of the major criticism I'd have of the film is that Emily Blunt's character, Kate, doesn't change or grow in the film.
Right, okay.
So again, kind of spoiler territory. By the end, but at the start, she is completely by the book, sort of robotic and a Girl Scout. By the end, she's still by the book, and that is the central conflict between her and Josh Brolin and Benicio del Toro. And at the end, she hasn't changed or even been kind of jaded by her experience. I think she just stays too static. But anyway, that's enough of me and my opinions. That's my review. I really like this film. It's not one of my favourite films. It's not something I rewatched between seeing it at the cinema in 2015 and watching it for this podcast. I found I've forgotten quite a lot of it, but actually, I just think it's a really excellent film. So, join us after the break. Hugh is going to tell us what he likes, what he doesn't like, and then give us his overall rating.
So, Hugh's Views coming up.
Hugh's Views. Hello and welcome back to Please Watch This. We are now going to hear Hugh's Views. So Hugh, what did you like/love about Sicario?
So what I really liked about this film is that there was that ambiguity to the storyline. That was the first thing that I really enjoyed about this film. That you do, like you said, you spend the first hour of the film not really knowing what's going on, which it creates an amazing amount of dramatic tension. The tension just always seems to be ramping up in this film.
Constant tension, isn't it? Yeah, it's like Get Out. You never, because the Get Out's got that ambiguity as well, isn't it? And you're not sure what's happening.
Yeah, it's got that kind of, it's like ratcheting slowly, and even when the film takes it dials it back a bit, it then knows how to turn it back on again in a very specific way. And it's just that it's a masterclass in how you make tension, and that's what I really enjoy about films, is a good drama that's meant to be like a thriller, knows how to create tension that's authentic, because you can create tension by a few tricks, like with sort of tense music. You can create tension by having horror films are famous for, you know, your jump scares, but, you know, I think a good example is I saw a film the other day, a little known indie film called Star Wars Episode 9. It's all the rage.
Tell me more.
I'm not going to give any spoilers or anything, but because of the nature of that film, there's bits of it where there's just no tension for the characters, because you know that, well, we're 20 minutes in, it's unlikely that this character's going to die. So you know that's kind of not good, you know, nothing bad's going to happen. Where in Sicario,
it's interesting that, actually, sorry to interrupt, but you know, a good film can do that. You know, like even in James Bond films, and you know he's not going to die. A good film that does that properly still makes you tense and care in that moment.
Yeah, I think James Bond films, they usually have the tension of, well, how does Bond succeed in this impossible scenario?
It becomes a puzzle rather than a threat to his life. Yeah,
and then the good thing in good Bond films is it'll be the support characters that you're concerned for. Well, you know, like, oh, well, will that character die? Or will this character die? Or where with this...
The answer is definitely, inevitably, they will, yes.
Yeah, so, and here you've got all those elements that make good, tense thriller come together. It's got, like you said, you mentioned the music's absolutely amazing. Like, there's one scene in the film where basically they go from America into Mexico to go retrieve a drug lord who they want to interrogate. And like you were saying about Denis Villeneuve, his use of long shots is they use this over-the-head camera shot of this convoy of black SUVs going through checkpoints from America to Mexico, and the music's just played at such a tempo with a tautness to it that you're on the edge of your seat, because you're like, this kind of, you know, these kind of cinema rules that you used to teach you to say something's going to happen here, something is going to kick off, or, you know, you're indoctrinated into believing that, yes, I'm about to visit something on screen's going to happen.
Yeah. And in the same way that you could have a shot of somebody sat in their front room and the lights are off, but if it's like a tripod camera, you go, well, that's just a person in the room. If it's a handheld camera waiting behind a door, you go, all right, well, this person's going to die. You know, there's a real thing going on here right now.
Yeah. What else I thought was good about this film? So a bit to echo what you said, the score's really good. Obviously, the tension's amazing. It's well written. The cinematography, because of its, you know, the director knows how to direct films and knows how to do it well, and he's like, you know, you see his signature of those long shots, which, again, in this film, like you said, they work. I think these do actually work really well in this film, more so better maybe than Blade Runner, actually, I would argue, because there's a couple of long shots in that film which felt a bit unnecessary, where in this film the pacing was perfect. I think the pacing is the best of all three Villeneuve films that we've seen.
I agree. I agree.
I don't think it's personally his best film in terms of what it deals with, its subject matter, and maybe obviously it's a few budgetary limitations, and, you know, the script is what it is. So, you know, it's not it's a mid-budget film rather than a big-budget film that maybe Arrival and Blade Runner actually had more to play with. So yeah, it's got, you know, there was things like that. What else do I like about this film? I liked the acting in it. Again, there's superb acting in this film from Benicio del Toro, from Emily Blunt. She plays this, you know, like you said, she's not a naive person. She's clearly an intelligent FBI agent who is good at a job. You know, there's a scene where they're like, oh, well, she's been kicking. They say in this interview, so at the beginning, you mentioned it already, there's a bit where Josh Brolin's CIA character's talking with her boss, and they're in the FBI meeting, and her and Daniel Kaluuya, her partner, are sat outside of this meeting with like the higher ups, and there's a bit where they just say, oh, well, she's been kicking doors in since day one, so you know she's got an aptitude, you know, she's seen something very horrific. There's an almost horror film-esque scene at the beginning where they find all these bodies essentially
gruesome,
cemented into the walls, or plastered into the walls, and there's like about 40 dead bodies in there, and it's awful. And you see she's got clear motivation, and you're just it's obtuse from the get-go of what's legal, what's right, what's moral, where do they stand on this. You know, you get the spoiler about halfway through that actually that they use the code, they keep using the word Medellin gets mentioned 3 or 4 times before. You know, one of the characters, I think Emily Blunt, goes, "What does Medellin mean?" And they just go, "It means control." Like you said earlier, it's about us controlling the supply of cocaine and narcotics from South America and Central America into the US. And if we can't stop it, but we can have more control. And then, you know, it becomes this morally grey film where you've got a character who isn't. She's clearly an ethical person. You know, she's clearly, her and her partner have these lines, but they keep crossing them. They keep going further and further, and it builds up to a marvelous scene at the end where her life is threatened by Benicio del Toro's character, who up until that point, or not up until that point, but slowly, everyone's roles are grey, and this film, what it does is it asks questions. And some films ask questions and don't give you the answers, and you're left going, well, you could have answered that question. You could have addressed this, and you're choosing not to. Where this goes, well, what are the moral consequences of the US's war on drugs? What is the effects that it's having on people on these border towns, like Juarez and El Paso, and what's the human cost of it? You see the human cost from a US citizen's point of view in terms of Emily Blunt. You see the collateral damage point of view from the Mexican State Police character who gets murdered by Benicio del Toro's character just because he's in the wrong place effectively at the wrong time, and he's a pawn used by the US to get this control. You see it from Del Toro's character point of view as well, because he's also a victim of this situation, because he used to be a prosecutor whose wife and son were brutally murdered. So it asks questions like, well, where are the grey areas? Where do you operate? Because you get Josh Brolin's character who openly admits and says, we just needed a domestic agency to accompany us whilst we worked on our home soil, effectively, because the CIA remit is outside of the US. It's technically not supposed to operate on US soil, its operations, but they've got this loophole, and they're the loophole, and you're seeing it from their point of view. Ultimately, when they just realise they're being used.
And it all comes out in one conversation. Really, it's not. There's a sort of drip feed, but really, it's they go into this fantastic tunnel scene where there's a lot of night vision and there's a lot of thermal vision. It's just really beautiful. Like you say, lots of long shots used really well. They're going into an enclosed space and it's been said in a previous scene, we're not likely to see more. I can't remember the numbers. More than like 20 or 30 people down there. They're going to be armed and all this sort of stuff. Yeah. And she goes through all this. She sees Benicio del Toro's character shoot somebody, take off in a police car with Silvio, the police officer, and then she's pulls a gun on Benicio del Toro. He shoots her. She's got the bulletproof vest on, and then she comes out, punches Josh Brolin, and he just very uncomfortable to watch. He drags her and sort of restrains her, doesn't he, against the wall, and then he kind of explains it. When she says, "What is Medellin?" Like you say, it's a time when they could control things, and it comes out in that. That's quite a nice scene, rather than having a 20-minute exposition sequence when she's being initiated into this role and she's being recruited. It's quite nice that you don't really know anything until that, and it's filled in. It's not, like you say, it's not this mystery that's still hanging over you after the film. It does at least try to explain itself.
Yeah. And it's like you said earlier about show don't tell. So she gets to see what's happening, what they're really there for, what Benicio del Toro's character Alejandro, what he's actually doing. She sees it, and that creates real tension between the characters, because he buggers off in a car, she comes back, and like you said, she immediately punches Josh Brolin's character in the face. I think he's called Ted in this, isn't he?
I think so, yeah.
And she punches him in the face and is like, I'm going to tell everyone what's happening here, and he just goes, look, this is what's happening, this is the reality of it,
And this is why you're not going to tell anyone, because I'm going to make a... Oh, he's called Matt, sorry, not Ted. I'm going to make a veiled threat. That would be, I think he says that would be a major mistake.
Yeah, and he's...
You've seen us kill people.
And like you said, that there's a contrast at the start of the film where he's in the flip-flops and he's dressed quite casual, and he's this kind of wise, smart, kind of Alec, sort of charming character who, people just know he's doing serious work. And then you see the serious CIA agent in the full military fatigues, night vision goggles, thermal goggles on, dangerous weapon, operating with special forces, and you're like, oh no, this guy is not here to fuck around. This is somebody who takes things very seriously. So at the cost of repeating myself, I think we're going to move into favourite scenes now.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So
actually, before we do, were there things you didn't like about the film?
Yeah, do you know what? We'll get into it in favourite scenes, because I think that's the natural place for it to maybe give it a bit of criticism.
Sure. So, what would be your favourite scene, Hugh?
So my favourite scene is the scene where they are in the traffic jam. I mean, have you ever seen a traffic jam so tense in your life?
So it's amazing, isn't it? To not have a high-speed chase, but instead just have things... Everyone's around you. Do you want to explain the scene for us?
Yes. So as I mentioned before, in this convoy of black SUVs, they're extracting this drug lord from Mexico to bring him in for interrogation, and the characters around Emily Blunt's character, who accompanies all these different intra-agency people. So the US Marshals are effectively going in there to make an arrest. It's it's vaguely under their jurisdiction. It would seem, because they're involved and they're the ones who put him in their SUV. And I think Alejandro says, "Don't trust the state police; they're not always on our side." Josh Brolin's character says, they won't hit us here at the facility or on the way to the facility. They'll get us on the way out. So you're kind of expecting some drama and some action to happen. As they're going along, there's a bit where they're all looking out for suspicious vehicles, and then they get to the Mexico border, the US border, and there's obviously more people are going into the US than you saw on the way in, where it was free flowing traffic. Try saying that quickly. And
easy for you to say.
Yeah. And so they're in this traffic jam, and they spot cars with people in it that look suspicious, and they see a gun, and you just think, oh, there's hundreds of people around them in these cars. You think all hell's going to break loose. And it's just a great definition of a tense scene where you're like, because it's quite early on in the film, and you don't know which way the film's going to play out, because it's a new property. You're not it's not. It's not a franchise film, so you're not like, well, everyone here is going to be fine. The only person...
It's reassuring.
I mean, literally, the only person in that scene you're thinking is going to survive, I thought, was Emily Blunt, because she's the main character. I was like, everyone here is up for debate in terms of their survival. And it kind of almost... The film plays with you in that way, because basically what happens is they all get out, and there's a shootout, and all the Mexican drug dealers who are there trying to rescue their kingpin get murdered by the US.
You got to say, some of them are a bit too conspicuous.
Yeah, there's one guy who's got tattoos on his face, isn't there?
All over his face, and he's there with a bunch of other guys who are just mean-looking dudes. I think they could have planned that better. But yeah, really tense, because you are looking out. The camera's your eye in that case, and you don't know who to trust and who not to trust. And you go, "Am I racially profiling people here? Too late. They've got guns. Okay, let's shoot those people." And then and Emily Blunt's character is nearly shot by
a state police officer. Yeah,
state police.
Yeah. Is that your favourite scene, or do you have a different scene?
Absolutely, yeah. I do love that scene. I think another one that competes with it for that favourite scene, I really like almost the final scene, Benicio del Toro, when he gets to the compound, gets to the house of his old nemesis, the man who killed his wife and daughter. Very tense.
Because very Juan Bond.
Yeah. And he arrives,
doesn't
and
really work,
they're
does
out.
It? James Bond. Jesus.
James Juan. Oh, John. Anyway, yeah. James Bond.
It's his Spanish cousin. It's his brother's Spanish cousin.
It's his brother's, yeah.
Not his cousin, but his
Which
brother's.
Would also be anyway. Yeah. But yeah, so for some context, he arrives. It's the man who he knows killed his family, and he's there and he's eating dinner with his family. Benicio del Toro, he's been on a murderous rampage up until this point. He's here basically for revenge. That's his entire MO really. And and you know as the viewer that this guy's family are going to be killed. You don't know in what manner or when. And sort of everyone knows that as well. They speak in English because they know the children don't speak English, which adds another layer of intrigue and tension to it, because they can sort of speak openly without being too opaque about it. And then he shoots them. He shoots the two boys and the man's wife, makes him watch it, and then shoots him. Yeah. But really, in a non-garish way, they're shot off screen. You just see their bodies on the floor.
Yeah, there's a brilliant scene. There's a brilliant shot of maybe a mid-range shot of Del Toro sat at the table, and he's just kind of leaning on the table with his pistol pointed at them all, and he just fires 3 shots really quickly, and there's no emotion on his face. Yeah. Nothing comes across. But as the audience, you're stunned because even though you know this guy's shady and you've just seen him kill a bunch of people, especially a character that you had invested time into as well, who'd been shown to have a young son and a family man and, living in tough conditions in Mexico and in Juarez, and all of a sudden this guy's just killed 2 children and a woman. And you're like, oh my God, this really is not... this ain't your grandpappy's drug lord films, So this is where I would say my only critique of the film, and it's more a critique than a criticism, is even though the best scene is the traffic jam scene, because it's early on and it ramps the tension up to 11, this is probably the most, because it's coming to the end of the film. It's almost the more of it's the tenser of the 2 scenes almost, because something's going to happen, but you're not entirely sure what's going to happen. And like I said, my only criticism is that this kind of the conclusion of the film, really, of the story that you're watching, the narrative that you're watching, is by a support character and not by Emily Blunt's character. She's not involved in that scene.
She doesn't. That's it. She doesn't grow. She doesn't really come to a resolution. She just now knows that she's got to watch her back the rest of her life.
I do think she grows. This is where maybe you and I differ on this. Is you see, it's not so much growth, but degeneration. She goes from, like you said, being this upright, standing, moral sort of character to allowing these morally grey, awful things to happen. I don't know if she knows that he went and murdered this guy's family, but she's clearly aware what his plan is, or she can make an educated guess to what he's really doing. And that there is, the film is called Sicario at the end of the day. So, in Spanish or in in Mexican slang is hitman. So it's it kind of comes.
Quiz question down the toilet then.
Damn. So I've got. I'll save it for myself. With that, you get that whole, it's like, oh, I've facilitated this man to go and kill, to be a hitman for the US, essentially. And there's actually a great bit of mise en scène that they do in this film. So they basically, at the beginning, she's, when she's in the meeting with Josh Brolin and her boss and her, she's actually got a bright blue denim shirt on. And as the film goes on, her shirt goes from being bright blue to slowly darkening into a colour of grey. And in the last scene, she's wearing a grey shirt. And in
That's
the last
interesting.
So they're literally charting the character's journey, so to speak, from being. I don't know what blue usually represents in these situations, but I think it's just the vibrancy that colour has.
I was going to say, she's sort of more washed out, isn't she? She wears very plain T-shirts, even when she's out at the bar. You sort of only notice it, you don't notice it when she's going to work, but you notice it when she takes the guy home, and you go, wow, she's very plainly dressed. Obviously a beautiful woman, but very plainly dressed, sort of basic T-shirt. Yeah, you're right. I'm watching the last scene now, actually, and it is just, there's no colour in that at all.
Yeah,
I like little decisions like that.
Yeah, because they're so nuanced that you don't notice them unless they're pointed out, or
your brain picks them up somewhere, doesn't it? It kind of fits. If she was wearing, rainbow coloured tie or tie dye, you'd be like, that doesn't seem to fit her mood at this point. That's a good spot. Well done.
Yeah, well, I can't take credit for it, unfortunately. I saw it on a video on YouTube, but
there are no original ideas on the Please Watch This podcast. It seems that was our one shot. But,
well, I got to be honest. I don't want to lie to the audience and take credit for something.
We never lie to the audience. We never do.
It's not something. It's not in our nature, Sam, is it?
No. We're not.
So,
we're like Thomas Jefferson.
Although people who do, who do lie. What is your favourite line of this film?
That's good. Very much from a liar, Benicio del Toro's character, where quite early in the film when Emily Blunt is asking him all kinds of questions about the cartels and so on, and he says, "You're asking me how a watch works. For now, let's just keep our eye on the time." And it's him ducking the question, but there's a lovely bit of poetry to it. He gets some fantastic lines in this film, and it sort of matches the tone of the film, really. It's not about kind of how it works or whatever, it's about being pragmatic. Pragmatism over idealism essentially is what it is. They're not trying to live in utopia, they're just trying to make the best of what they've got.
Yeah, and these situations like this, it's such an unusual conflict, really, because it's not about the two states trying to control territory. It's about one set of people trying to control a supply of something that's illegal and into another state, and that other state having such an immense power of law enforcement that it's trying to stop it, and therefore it causes violent escalation. And how
it's curious because
something that's resolvable.
It's the beauty of it that it's not good and evil, because essentially Emily Blunt, Josh Brolin, Benicio del Toro, they've all got essentially the same objective, which is kind of less death, or at least Josh Brolin and Emily Blunt's character, less death, less drug trafficking and all that sort of stuff. It's just that Emily Blunt is the idealist and Josh Brolin is the pragmatist in this scenario. He's willing to do the immoral things because he's trying to do it for the greater good. He's not evil because he wants to have his own empire or anything like that. He wants what she wants. It's just that she wants to do it by the book. And I think that's so much better than having, well, these are the American cops, FBI guys, and these are the Mexican drug cartels. Those are the good guys, those are the bad guys. There we go. Sort it out in 90 minutes. We'll hold your hand all the way through it. It's a lot better than that. I mean, I've done a little bit of research and found out that it's really not a true depiction at all of anything. In this case, the cartels, the borders, anything like that, which is unfortunate, but it feels real. And that reality is because it's blurry and it's grey.
So, is there any other lines that stood out for you?
No, that was the big one. There was one I mentioned earlier, which was there's keeping us in the dark, and there's what you're doing to us, and I thought that kind of summed up Daniel Kaluuya's Emily Blunt's character. But there are a lot of really good lines. I mean, Josh Brolin is very sardonic and ironic and cool and witty. When she says, "What's the mission? What's the plan?" and he says to dramatically overreact, which I thought was great. He's just very ironic and cool. What was your favourite
line? So my favourite line was again from Benicio del Toro's character Alejandro when he's at the dinner. Sorry, when he's talking to Emily Blunt at the end and he's threatening her. Essentially, what happens is he goes because they needed her as an FBI agent, as mentioned before, to condone their actions. She has to sign a letter that says everything was above board and legal, essentially, in their operation. And obviously, her conflict as a character is none of this was above board and none of this was legal, and they went and murdered people on US time, essentially, on federal time. Benicio del Toro says to her, "You should move to a small town where the rule of law still exists. You will not survive here. You are not a wolf, and this is the land of wolves now."
What we're going to do after the break is we're going to hear Hugh's rating, we're going to hear the critics' response, and we're going to have a little wee quiz about this here film that I quickly need to rewrite because we basically covered all the questions in our conversation. So join us after the break, and we'll talk to you soon. Hello and welcome back to Please Watch This podcast and that. We're going to find out Hugh's rating.
Please watch this
first
and
of all.
Watch a bit of this, a bit of that.
If I didn't have to change the station or whatever, we'd change the name of the podcast to that. Not that we have, stationery that we've... Anyway, Hugh,
wait,
how many anonymous...
What happened with the stationery request that we made?
I don't know, the truck fell off the road?
Oh, not again.
I know, we really shouldn't have annoyed those mobsters.
Yeah.
See?
Look, just because you're from Romania doesn't mean you're a mobster. But in this case, they were.
The Bulgarians.
yeah. In this case, they were. And now they're taking it out on our paper clips. You know how hard it is to get "Please watch this" ingrained onto a paperclip? Easier than you think.
Yeah.
And that, yeah. So,
terrible.
Yeah. So my rating. What my rating?
How many anonymous henchmen's widows out of 10?
How many Smithies out of 10, essentially?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Smithy can't be here because he's working late over at Dr. Evil's corporation.
We'd see a lot of Silvio's family in this. So quite,
Yeah.
We know his son plays football and all this sort of stuff. We know he's an alcoholic. So yeah, how many out of 10 would you give this?
Yeah, I'd give it a 7. It's a solid. It's a solid 7. 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I think I'd probably go for an 8, but I'm in that same ballpark. Very enjoyable, really well made. Not going to trouble your top 20 films.
It just lacks a little something, I think. I think maybe that fact that it did have an exciting end, but ultimately the wrong character had the exciting end, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that might be it. Maybe we weren't really that invested in his... It was only a scene earlier that we'd found out that his family were killed by Fausto, so... Yeah, I think that's fair. It's kind of the ending that logically came from the events of the film, but
yeah,
there was no. I mean, I think I'm right in saying Josh Brolin's last appearance in the film is just when they come out of the tunnel. There's no kind of resolution to his story other than he's finally telling Kate the purpose of their mission.
Yes, you're right. No, he doesn't really appear again, does he? That's correct. Yeah,
that is odd. I'm really intrigued to watch the sequel. Neither of us have seen that. Obviously, it'd be weird if you had.
Yeah, it's unusual that a sequel get made to a film that doesn't have the same director and cinematographer and all the same cast. I think the only person who's pretty similar on this is they've got Del Toro and Brolin back, the same writers still doing it. So he clearly wanted to make a sequel and... he made
it's not as bad as
film.
the Son of Mask, where it had nobody involved from the film The Mask with Jim Carrey. It just had Jamie Kennedy. Just an awful film. A really awful film.
Yeah, please don't watch that.
Please don't watch that.
Yeah. Do you know how hard it is to get that ingrained onto a paperclip?
Just PDT. Please watch this. Please.
Yeah.
PWT.
Yeah, it's
I've been saying BDT a lot with Benicio del Toro, so I've got that in my head.
I see. I call him BLT just because,
That's
I'm
the
ignorant Anglophile.
Malapropism.
Yeah,
why not? So, critics-wise,
what did
the
they say?
On Metacritic. Yeah, what do you reckon would be the Metascore?
I think it'd be roughly about a 7, maybe as high as a 7.5, maybe. I don't think...
You're not far off. The critics actually quite liked it. 82.
Oh, right. That was a bit off.
I think it sort of helps by having star power. It helps by having someone like Roger Deakins, who's, probably the most famous cinematographer going and should have won an Oscar, years before he finally won it for Blade Runner 2049. That sort of thing kind of helps. Todd McCarthy in The Hollywood Reporter. Now, it's weird with Metacritic when you look at their list because it says 100% when you can look at the review and it wouldn't necessarily say that, but a very positive 100% from Todd McCarthy in The Hollywood Reporter. He says, shot in New Mexico, the production has been superbly decked out in every department, but special note must be made of the brilliantly idiosyncratic and disturbing score by Icelandic composer Jóhann Jóhannsson, which cranks up the unease of key scenes with an electronic bass wallow that then descends to seemingly impossible depths of apocalyptic dread.
There is a lot of apocalyptic dread in this film.
Yeah, deep sense of dread.
Yeah.
The longer the note, the deeper the dread.
Which is interesting because it's not a film dealing with the apocalypse.
No, not in any sort of real sense or allegorical sense.
That's why I said it.
But it has that dread. On the other side, we've got Amy Nicholson from Voice, which is some sort of online publication. Negative review, 40% they gave it.
Mother flockers.
They said, I left the film sickened and scrambled, much as I did Villeneuve's previous films, Prisoners and the double Gyllenhaal head-scratcher Enemy. Villeneuve's proven he's got a strong punch. The trouble is, he barely aims. Now, is that just saying that because that is quite a good line, that? that somebody packs a strong punch, but they barely aim. What does that mean? I couldn't really figure out from the rest of the review, to be honest.
I mean, is she saying that because it asks more questions than it delivers, that
it's not a true aim, or it's not a...
Yeah, like it's not making enough of a point about the whole war on drugs and the Mexican cartels, that, it kind of does descend from this sort of, I don't know, this like procedural about the human conflict to kind of a revenge film ultimately, maybe maybe she doesn't like that aspect of it.
Or is it that he's not aiming high enough and that it's taking something too easy? But at the same time, it is more complicated than that.
I think
it's not just a simple crime drama.
No, it's not. I mean, a bad film wouldn't have Silvio's character, the character of Silvio, in it.
Yeah.
They might show you the cost. They would do something silly like they'd have a kid cross the road and get shot by a stray bullet.
Yeah,
and the mum would run out and hold it and go, "Why, God, why do you take my child?" Where with this, they just show the relationship of a man and his son, and they build and build and build, and then you don't get there's some sacrifice has to be made in this film, and that's the character that truly you get seen making the sacrifice, and that is the human cost of this conflict. I don't know, Sam, why she would have that opinion.
Yeah, I think I don't agree with it, but it's nice to have other views, isn't it?
It gives us something to rebut as well, especially when we both agree.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think? Anything more than she's just saying that he hasn't been specific enough or aimed high enough, or?
I don't really know. Maybe it ties hand in hand with the fact that it is somewhat forgettable. Maybe there needs to be a bigger set piece or a bigger something. I really don't know.
I think we praise the dialogue in this film for its realism and its and its cuteness and its astuteness as well, quite frankly. But there isn't that many memorable lines in the film. I think maybe she might have wanted more dialogue where it's making a point.
But it's certainly not a criticism I'd make of this film. Relative to most films, I think it's got wittier dialogue and more memorable lines than the average film, especially the average film that's like this.
It's not a film that cuts at like... Some films try to go, well, here's the impact of something, and it'll just cut away randomly, and then you'll be left going, well, I want more of that scene. What happened after, or what's still going on? Where's the... This doesn't really happen in this film, and films that tend to be dramatic tend to use that device to crank the tension and the drama, and they let you, like you say, they'll let your imagination do some of the showing. Where with this, every scene has a satisfying ending, even if it's not what you want.
They said I left the film sickened and scrambled, and I thought, I don't know whether that's sickened by the sort of source material and the content and
the violence.
I mean, I don't know. When I see something like that, I left the film sickened. I think it sounds like a bit of a Christian Voice kind of response to it.
I think a lesser film, the violence would seem voyeuristic and explicit, where in this it's impactful and it's designed to elicit the response that you want.
Yeah, it doesn't unnecessarily linger on something without good reason. That's the critic. So overall, generally very positive, 82% as I say on Metacritic. Shall we find out whether or not you paid much attention to it?
Let's hope I get more than 82% on the quiz.
Let's see. So you need to get more than 4 out of 5.
Wait, hang on. That was my machine gun impression, by the way.
Yeah, it's good. Impressive.
Thank you. So why are you doing 5 questions, Sam? Where's the 7, Sam? After last week and me doing 7 questions,
it's a lot more work. And to be honest, all the questions came up with they're too easy. So I've struggled to get some challenge in there. So 5, and it's for our listeners. Really, it's to keep our runtime down so we can get it on YouTube easier. So let's stick with 5, shall we?
Okay.
So
that I originally suggested at the very beginning of this podcast, just making that point.
You know what I mean. I think you once said, what's a mind if it's not for changing, and I like to live my life by your phrases. So question 1. We know that Sicario means hitman in Mexico, obviously. But according to the title card, where does the word Sicario come from?
It comes from the Middle East, from Jew.
Sorry, where?
Not what's the language? Bugger. What's it called?
Hebrew.
Hebrew. Thank you. Yeah, it's meant to be of Hebrew origin.
Can you tell me more?
It means hitman in Hebrew, and then through.
No, so it's the Zealots of Jerusalem.
Oh yeah,
killers who hunted the Romans who invaded their homeland. So I'll give you 82% of a point there. I'll give you 0.82. Question 2: where does Kate work at the start of the film? As in, like geographically in the US, where is she working?
She is.
You can give me the city and or the state.
They're in New Mexico.
No, they're in New Mexico.
No, oh gosh! It tells you right at the beginning of the film. It actually says it on screen.
And then Josh Brolin's character says to her, you were doing nothing in... Like he's trying to say why she came on the mission.
I don't remember. Nope, Sam, it's gone. I can't remember.
It's Phoenix, Arizona.
Fucking Phoenix! I knew it as soon as you said it.
Mm-hmm.
That's really frustrated me that I didn't get that one right.
I'm just frantically writing another question. Here we go, I've got it. Question 3. I'll tell you what it was going to be. It was going to be, to what area does Brolin's character, Matt, tell Kate they're going for their initial mission, which of course is...
El Paso, Texas.
El Paso, but they end up going to Juarez. So what it is instead is, to what does Daniel Kaluuya's character compare Kate's eyebrows?
Caterpillars.
God damn it, yeah. They're like caterpillars, like wild beasts.
Yeah.
And he's criticising her appearance and hygiene. So I think so far you've got them all. Well, no, you've missed one. Question 4. How much of Diaz's money do they seize? How much money? When they go to the bank?
A lot.
A heck of a lot.
I don't know, Sam.
No, 17 million. Question 5, last one. What does Alejandro say before he shoots Fausto's family?
Alejandro. That was playing in the background.
Can you imagine?
He says, "Time to meet God."
Well done. Very good.
I got 3.
Very
I did
good.
not get
So
82%.
3, I think, of those 5. No, so we'll say we got 4 out of 6 because there was technically 6 questions there. What's that? 4 out of 6. Quick mental maths is probably, what is that? 16 times 6 is that 16. So it's about 16, and then you times 4 by about 16 and a bit. That's obviously 40. No, you didn't get it.
Damn.
Could have just told you that. Did not get it. Yeah, absolutely. So that's the quiz. That's Sicario. I'm glad you liked it. It didn't feel like a film that you could properly dislike. It felt like a film that you might be slightly underwhelmed by or whatever, but I didn't expect a 4 out of 10 or anything.
I think it could have had a little bit more action,
that.
But it does have that amazing night vision thermal goggles scene, and the action in it's realistic.
It could have been cheapened, but it could have been cheapened by bigger shootouts and stuff.
Well, at least the action in this film realistic, because it kind of goes from, you see it from her point of view in the tunnels, and it's quite scary, and you hear gunfighting in the background, and then it cuts to Del Toro, who's the only thing you really know about him is that he was a public prosecutor in Mexico, and he's
that was tempted to be one of those questions, but I think this is a bit too
obvious
part of his character.
And then he turns out to be this stone cold assassin, just offing henchmen and people's families.
It would be an interesting film if it was about him.
Yes,
it's kind of like The Punisher, or something like that. Kind of families killed, goes through all this to because that would have made the denouement make more sense. It?
He could almost be a bit like the character from a recent film with the actor Michael Fassbender, whose name I could not remember there for a second, where he plays a lawyer, and he ends up working. He gets forced to work for the cartels in somewhere in the south of America, and there's a horrible thing that happens to his. To somebody he knows, and maybe he could be a bit of an extension of that. If anyone can remember that film,
right? Some sort of
I think it's called. I think it's literally called The Lawyer.
Right. Okay.
I don't
that
think
rings
it's
a bell.
got anything more than that. Let's check The Lawyer. See, this is me actually.
Man checking IMDb on his phone. Is it The Accountant or is it the?
Do you know what? It could be The Accountant. It could be The Accountant actually.
Ratatouille. No, that's Ben Affleck.
Oh, it's The Counselor. That's it.
The Counselor. Oh, is that the one with Javier Bardem? Oh,
yes.
Am I thinking of something
else?
else?
It's got Javier Bardem.
Yeah.
Got Penelope Cruz in it. I actually don't remember having Cameron Diaz in it, but she's in it.
Yeah, I remember seeing ads or trailers or posters for that and thinking, oh, it looks like a great cast.
It was a decent film,
and then,
but not amazing.
I think Kerma didn't like it or something, so I never got around to watching it. So we've done Sicario, we've done this big thing. Maybe in the future we'll do the sequel. Neither of us have seen it. Maybe if I watch it and it's great, then we will. But we'll take it as it goes. What we're going to do next week, Hugh?
So we're going to shift tones somewhat. Because, again, on this podcast, we like to recommend classics to one another as well that neither of us have seen. So far I've watched 12 Angry Men, I've seen It's a Wonderful Life, Sam saw Empire Strikes Back, he saw Raiders of the Lost Ark. So we're going to dip our toes back into some good old-fashioned classic 80s filmmaking, and we're going to do the James Cameron classic Aliens. Turns out Sam hasn't seen Aliens with Sigourney Weaver.
I think so. Maybe I'll watch it and be like, oh yeah, I've definitely seen every frame of this.
Well, let's pretend that you haven't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we're going to do that. Sam, what do you know about it?
I don't know much other than Riley's back. It's been a long time since I saw the first one, so I know that Sigourney Weaver's character Riley survives it. I think she's she's one of the very few survivors, and I've seen a lot of video essays, because a lot of video essays do reference the Alien saga.
Is this going to be bit like with It's a Wonderful Life, as you kind of know the outcome before you've seen it because it's so heavily referenced in pop culture that it's hard not to?
A little
so
bit.
You're going to kind of watch this with more historical/critical eyes rather than, maybe take a 2020 perspective of an 80s film.
Yeah, it could be that. I mean, it's because I'm pretty sure Ripley. I said Riley, didn't I? I'm pretty sure Ripley survives this, and then she's cloned, or she's in cryo sleep or something, either between 1 and 2 or between 2 and 3 or something like that. I know that is it Bill Paxton's? No, not Bill. Is it Bill Paxton?
It is, yeah, Bill Paxton.
Yeah, I know I think he's killed off screen either at the start of this one or I think it's probably the next one. So I know little snippets of half forgotten bits of information. I really don't know much more. So I am looking forward to watching it. I might try and, if I've got time, I might try and fit in the first one again this week just to remind myself of what the hell happened in that film.
Well,
and go from there. Really, I do like the first one. I don't love it, but I do like it.
Fair enough. So that's what we're going to do next week.
Look forward to it. Hugh, if they want to get in touch with us, how might they go about doing that?
Right, Sam. So what they need to do is they've got two options. They can either join the FBI or they can join a Mexican drug cartel. It's up to them. They can choose.
CIA? Could they join the CIA?
No,
Would that get them there?
no, they can never join the CIA. What do you take us for mad men on this podcast? God, the CIA.
So join a Mexican drug cartel. Yes.
Obviously. So join a Mexican drug cartel.
Blood cartel.
Yeah, one that specifically handles human blood rather than drugs. Join a Mexican drug cartel. Then I want you to move to Juarez, obviously. You need to become quite high up in the organisation. You then need to get a joint operation by the FBI, the CIA, the Marshals, the Army. They need to come and collect you. And then when you're being interrogated in a very aggressive manner by a random Mexican person, I want you to give them a message and then get them to email us in.
Right. Yes, that's good. And
that's the only way they can do it. No other way.
Right. If the internet existed, though, and they could email us, is there an email address they could get in touch with us?
I just said no. Did you not listen?
Right. Good. Well, I'll see you all next week.
So, yeah, if you want to get in touch with us about this film or any other film that we've reviewed here on Please Watch This, you can contact us at pleasewatchthis.pod@gmail.com. I'll repeat that one more time for those in the back who weren't listening.
Do.
Mrs. Sinclair, listen up now. Stop with the carrots. It's pleasewatchthis.pod@gmail.com.
Fantastic. And what I'd like to encourage them to do, if they listen to this before the next episode comes out, is tell us what you know about Aliens. What do you think of Aliens? If you do mention that to us via email or social medias, then we'll have
the film Aliens, not just Aliens in general. Just to be specific.
If you want to talk about aliens, just generally aliens, that's fine. Yeah. We'll do
Sam,
that
where else other than now YouTube can our fans interact with us? our adoring masses. Hello,
adoring masses of fans. Hello, adoring masses. They can get in touch with us on Twitter at PleaseWatchPod. We do have a subreddit. Very little has been done with it so far, but we are on Reddit. We're on Facebook at PleaseWatchPod as well. So all kinds of routes. We tend to be better on Twitter than any other, so that would be my recommendation to you, the listener. And we look forward to hearing from you.
Okay, then. I think that about does
cool.
it, doesn't it?
Well, that's it. We love you guys. Thanks for persisting and maintaining and listening. And, tell your friends.
Yeah. If you have any.
Yeah, tell a friend that you love them first, and then tell them about the show.
You have to do that. I mean... Yeah, they might not be your friend because they'll be like, "Why are you telling me this?" I thought we'd. But if you're feeling that way inclined, if you're feeling emotionally, you want to give a friend a hug, and then be like, "Please watch this, the podcast." Just whisper it lovingly in their ear. Just
look after yourselves, everyone, and everyone else. Look after them.
Yeah. Anyway,
be nice to be awesome to one another. All right, take care. We'll talk at you next week.
See you next week.
Bye.